Welcome to Organic News with Kat Waters, revealing the truths behind the conspiracy. Every Tuesday from 6 to 8 Eastern.
Thank you for tuning in to this Tuesday, December the 1st, 2015, Organic News on Awake Radio. And the first guest I have with me is Calen Otto, who I met outside of Macy's on Black Friday. She was with the animal rights, part of the animal rights people. I was filming the Black Friday tour of shame with a group of protesters that were going from place to place, like Staples, Chick-fil-A, and I forget the other business, just giving statistics about each business and the union busting that's going on. And at the Chick-fil-A, there was some kind of an LGBT issue at that place. And so, Calen Otto, welcome to Organic News on Awake Radio.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And you're with Collectively Free. So tell us what Collectively Free is.
Okay, so Collectively Free is a group that started in New York, but it's kind of spreading everywhere now. And they work towards animal liberation. And they also work towards a bigger picture, with the gay community, with, they focus on discrimination and trying to, make an equal playing field for everybody. But they really are into total animal liberation through nonviolent actions and empowering the community and creative ways to show this to the public.
And so you were, they were outside of Macy's, targeting Macy's for a certain reason.
Right. Actually, we had been doing some other protests the day before, and then we learned there would be a fur protest outside of Macy's, so we decided to go to that too. So that wasn't our event, but we just thought anything to help, we'd love to join in.
Yeah, that's why a friend of mine came back to stand in front of Macy's holding his sign. Because the shopping bags of people coming out of Macy's says "believe" on them, like,
right.
Believe in Macy's, believe in shopping,
Right.
So just talk a little bit about Collectively Free. On your website, the organizing principles, right? The first one says total animal liberation.
Right. So what we basically mean by that, and I'm still new to Collectively Free, that was the first time I'd done anything with them, but I've been doing things for a little bit with Direct Action, which is another group that's almost the same, except Collectively Free covers a lot more. But they basically, what we want is total animal liberation, so that, we're not oppressing animals because of their species. We're not saying this animal is better than this animal and we should eat this animal, and it's okay to make, a fur coat or leather boots out of this animal just because, a lot of people think the cow or the pig is a lot different than a house pet, which is a cat or dog or something like that. But in our eyes, it's not, it's just speciesism. And so we just want to bring that awareness to the public so that we can stop discriminating animals based on physical characteristics or ideas that we've already created about them.
But the sad thing about it is that it's actually, domestic pets that are, getting slaughtered and killed too. Dogs
Right.
And cats too.
Right, exactly. And that's, that's the thing. We just, in our perfect world, things would be vegan and clothes would be vegan and we would eat vegan because we wouldn't say that this animal's okay to eat, and we wouldn't say it's okay to take, a dog or cat and eat that like they do in other countries or use it for fur or anything like that.
Right. So, oh yeah, there's horrible pictures. If anybody wants to look up, I'm almost kind of sorry. I looked up images of dog and cat slaughter in China. So
Right.
I wanted to point out the fact that the animal rights activists in front of Macy's were holding up some really, really graphic photographs.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, I've always loved animals, and I mean it's really unbelievable what happens. I mean, and it's easy to turn away. I mean,
Right.
I could not watch that video. There is just absolutely no
Oh, no.
way. I did.
It's,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I did film a little bit actually of this one. It wasn't that graphic, but it was still really distressing, of this small, beautiful little white. I don't even know what kind of an animal it was. I don't know if it was a mink, but it was just white, and it was caught in a trap, and it was just struggling, and it was, oh my God, I did an article. I write some articles and post photographs on Hot Indie News. And I posted those graphic pictures.
Right.
I didn't care if people complained. I mean, I don't even really. If people don't look at the article, they don't look at it. But
Right.
exposing the horror is what is needed.
Exactly. Because a lot of us are unaware where our products come from or where our food come from. So it may be disturbing to look at, but I think it's what's needed to bring this to the eye of the general public, because a lot of people wouldn't participate in it, if they saw it firsthand, or if they at least knew what was going on.
So I invite people, again, look up dog and cat slaughter in China. I'm not saying that China is the only place that this is happening, but
Right.
A lot of it does happen in China. Can you tell, where does most of this animal slaughter take place? I mean, I guess it's all over the world.
Well, yeah, actually, I think we focus a lot on the cat and dog slaughter because it tends to bother us more because we're so used to having these animals as pets. But when we look at the bigger picture, the slaughter is happening all around us here in the United States, with all the animals, with, pigs, chickens, all that stuff. For a lot of us in Collectively Free, the way we look at it is they're all on an equal playing field: cats, dogs, chickens, cows, pigs. So it is sad that that's happening to cats and dogs for the fur, but also it's sad that it's happening all over the United States so often to other animals that we're just not aware of. I actually looked up some statistics to be able to talk about it, and specifically to the fur, it said more than 50 million animals are violently killed, to use in fashion, every year. And the way they do it is just scary, like gassing, electrocution, and neck breaking and stuff like that. But then just overall, when we look at the other animals that are killed for meat, anything like that, in 2001, 45 billion animals were slaughtered worldwide for human consumption. And it says that the latest figures indicate it has risen up to 55 billion. So each year, approximately 9 million of the animals in the U.S. are raised specifically to be eaten, and they may not even make it to the slaughterhouse. So, yeah, it's really sad to think about those animals too, but a lot of this problem here of violence and violence towards animals right here on our own doorsteps in the United States.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, I mean, they're having the climate change talks in Paris this week and next week. And I wanted to just mention that because, I mean, everything ends up falling under the umbrella of capitalism. I mean, that's what everything is about, the almighty dollar. And so I feel like what is happening to the earth, what is happening to these animals, what is happening to people, what's happening in, Paris with the attacks, and Syria and all these places, even in this country with
Right.
police killing people, and I mean, it goes on and on and on.
It does. And I mean, that stuff, you know, all this violence that's happening is terribly heartbreaking, you know, whether it's here in other countries and or whether it's violence that we think is a bigger scale or a smaller scale, you know, but I think violence is violence, and no one really wants to participate in that, you know, deep in their heart when you're coming from love. And I think one of the ways that we could start to just end violence on a I want to say small scale, but it's not a small scale. It's a big scale. Is watching, you know, what we eat and what we buy, because what we eat and buy is what we're paying for. It's what we're promoting. It's what we're keeping. You know, it's the companies that we're keeping in business. So if we want a more peaceful world, it really needs to begin with the individual and our choices. You know, it's so sad to look at these attacks that are violent, and to sit and be sad about it and think about yourself and what you can do to improve. And I think that although sometimes we can't make the biggest changes for other countries and prevent violence for them, we could start with ourselves and, you know, not buy animal products, you know, that promote violence. Just think of what we can do ourselves to start making the world a more peaceful place, because just like violence spreads, you know, peace and love spreads too. So I think that's really important.
See, you know, thank you for saying that, because, you know, my philosophy and what I've tried to tell people for decades is exactly that. You know, the reason why I kind of brought up climate change is because people are not cultivating things that counter capitalism. You know,
exactly.
Like you just mentioned, you know, compassion and things like that. Those things need to be cultivated. Like they literally, human beings literally must farm them. Like I feel like we're all farmers.
Yeah.
You know, you can, like everyone is responsible for cultivating healthy relationships, compassion, and nurturing.
Right.
And I wanted to tie that in with climate change, because what I told this woman, the other group that was with you in front of Macy's on Black Friday was a group called CAAF Group.
Okay.
Caring Activists Against Fur. And I told, you know, when I look at the pictures and the videos of the horrible things that are happening to those animals, and it's also happening to people on other side, you know, and you know, in this country and in other countries, what is happening to those animals in the video is slowly and gradually happening to everyone.
People, right. One of the main things, you know, the main chants we've done with Collectively Free is human freedom, animal rights, which is my personal favorite, because when you look at these things and you're talking about animals, you have to remember the people too. I mean, the people that are abused in the process of making these, in the process of butchering the animals, you know, that's a hard emotional toll on people. No one should think that that's their only option for a job, you know. No one should go to work every day and be in death and violence. That doesn't promote a peaceful world. So it takes a toll on the people, and then the more violence you add to your life, you know, the more emotionally unbalanced you are, and that just doesn't create a peaceful world in general when we look at it that way.
I wanted to, again, I'm kind of like a little bit, just for the moment, stuck on this kind of issue of climate change and how the treatment of these animals are connected to it. The fact that, I mean, I've seen photographs of cows where they literally make this sort of gas tank looking opening on like on a cow, so they could just go right into the cow's stomach. And I don't know. I mean, I don't even really know what the purpose of it is. But
Yeah.
this entire like man making over nature.
Right. That's a huge problem because we're just, I actually. It's good that you brought that up. I got some statistics for you on that.
Sure. Thank you, Calen.
About the environment. And this was a report in the New Scientist, but they said that driving a hybrid car rather than an average vehicle would conserve a little over 1 ton of carbon dioxide per year. So a lot of us focus on that, but a vegan diet, however, consumes 1.5 tons less than the average American diet. So adopting a vegan diet actually does more to reduce emissions than driving a hybrid car. With the energy needed to produce a single hamburger, you could drive a small car 20 miles. So I think that when we're talking about climate change and global warming and what we're doing to the earth and the atmosphere, if everyone could change or tailor their diet more in a better way, we could actually make some big changes. The first go-to thing we think about is cars and, turn the lights off, all that good stuff that we've been taught as we're growing up. But really, if we take a look at the animals and what's happening there, that could make a huge change on the environment. A huge, huge change.
And I also, I think I blogged about this a while ago, but I think it was Food Inc., that documentary Food Inc. That I watched, and it showed the chickens, being injected with God knows what steroid or something to make them grow faster. And the poor chicken can't even hold itself up because the body grows faster than the bones grow.
Right.
And again, I look at this chicken and I'm like, oh my God, like that is us. That is exactly what we are doing to ourselves.
Yep. Right.
And because, they take the little baby pigs and cows away from the mother, like as soon as it's born.
Right.
That's exactly what we're doing to ourselves and other human beings too.
Exactly.
And rushing our kids to grow up faster than nature really intended. And ourselves, and burning ourselves out faster than we're naturally intended.
Right. That's totally true. Everything that we're doing is a reflection of us. And it's so true about the animal, like the chicken that you were talking about. They're pumped full of hormones and chemicals and all that stuff, and then we eat it. So we invite that into our lives, and we wonder why we have so many diseases and so many deaths. And it's literally what we're putting into our body and just re-inviting back into our lives.
Right. I mean, like, who would want to eat like an animal that was just completely tortured? And the thing that's so scary is, like, I think in China, they think that the animal is tastier if they, like, boil it alive before they eat it.
Right. And the thing is, it sounds so disgusting to us, because it is. But the thing is, we need to look at, even as Americans, we're literally torturing and slaughtering and killing animals alive, or when they're just born. Or, tasing them, whether it be for fur or food. We are just as torturous with our meat. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. And we look at other cultures and we're like, wow, that's so gross or that's so wrong. But we need to take stop and, look at ourselves too, because we're torturing our animals just as much, and no form of it is right or helpful.
So on your Collectively Free website, there is 10 reasons to go vegan for your health. And the first one is eating processed meat increases the risk of death from heart disease by 72%.
Right.
The second is men who eat 2.5 eggs or more a week increase their chances of developing lethal prostate cancer by 81%.
Yep.
The third is people who regularly eat processed or red meat up their chances of developing colon cancer by 50%.
Yeah.
Vegan women decrease their chance of acquiring female-specific cancers like breast, cervical, and ovarian cancer by 34%.
Right. Right.
Elderly men and women who consume high amounts of dairy run a risk of fractures higher by 200%.
Wow.
Elderly men and women who consume high amounts of dairy. So, yeah, they say eating or drinking dairy like strengthens the bones, but this is saying the exact opposite.
It does. It's like, the milk is acid, and the pH levels in your body are trying to balance that acid out, and it actually turns to your bones to pull calcium from your bones. So, we're growing up with this idea that it makes stronger bones, and we need meat, we need protein, and blah, 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 all that stuff that comes from dairy. But, I think the vegan community has known for a while that that's not the case, and now there's more studies coming out about it. So the general public is finding out too. So it's just, reinventing our story again. Because the story we've been told is that that's what we need, when it really wasn't true. So we definitely need to work on reinventing a new way of thinking.
Right, and I'm sure it was like the milk industry giving money to politicians or whoever, to be saying that stuff.
Right. When you go into elementary schools or high schools or whatever, and you have your signs in the gym or in classrooms, that have the people with the milk mustaches on, and your food pyramid, all that stuff is paid for and sponsored by the
Hello? Oh, Calen? Oh, it sounds like... Oh, yeah, there you
so
go.
a lot of people are just accepting that without
wait.
finding out on their own, and then you don't really...
Calen, it sounds like I'm losing you a little bit. Calen?
Oh, sorry, you went out for a second. Can you say that again?
Oh, yeah, I was losing you too, so I was
I
was just going to ask you to repeat what you said.
I was just saying that when you go into schools and you see posters in the gym that sponsor, the food pyramid with your meat and dairy,
right.
Milk gives you strong bones. That's all paid for by the meat and dairy industry.
Exactly.
And was given to the schools, to keep people buying it, to keep people hooked on it. And it's not true. And I really think that a lot of people aren't aware of this, so we really need to be aware so we can say, no, this isn't true. I don't want to teach this anymore. And really educate people from when they're younger what is really good for you without taking it from a company, without being paid to teach that, without getting that information. We need to just give real information that's true and helpful.
Jesus.
Without, thinking of the dollar sign.
Right. So we have like 4 minutes, and there's 4 more points on the 10 reasons to go vegan, and the 6th one is a vegan diet is high in fiber, low in fat, cholesterol free, and rich in vitamins and minerals, perfect for children to avoid overweight, obesity, which affects 1 in 3 children.
Right.
I was going to say, like, I actually don't believe that we're supposed to be drinking cow's milk anyway. I mean...
No. Isn't it funny? I was just recently listening to something. It's like, why did we pick cow's milk? We don't drink chimpanzee milk or, dog milk or, we don't. Why did we pick cow's milk? That's for baby cows to get them huge and big. It's not for humans. The only milk we should be drinking is human milk when we're babies.
Right. 7, those who eat fish, when compared to vegans, have mercury levels up to 10%.
Right.
Sorry, not 10%, 10 times.
10 times.
Nobel Prize winner Elizabeth Blackburn found that a vegan diet turned on genes that prevented diseases and turned off cancer, heart disease genes, and other illnesses within 90
Right.
days. Wow.
Yeah, what you eat is you're you're creating your future with what you eat.
Yep.
So it's really important to eat a good, healthy, and in my opinion, of course, I'm biased because I'm vegan, but you want to fuel your body in the proper ways and prevent things so that at the last minute you're not like, oh my gosh, I'm sick. What do I do? You want to start out healthy.
Exactly. And I also, nobody talks about relationships. I always think relationships are an extremely important part of our health also, and the people
Right.
and the way that we relate to one another.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that, like cultivating, relationships are also nutritious. Like you could think of, the
Right.
relationships with your friends and family, if you have like good family, and make that really healthy and nutritious also, because a lot of times
Right.
the way that people relate to each other is not very healthy at all.
No, and that can take a toll on your physical body, your mental state. So that is totally true. That's really important. And one of the things that I like about collectively free and being vegan and all this stuff, you're looking at how you perceive the world and your relationship with other people and your relationship with all beings, animals too. And once you start to take a look at yourself and you can work on that, you can work on that relationship with your food, with the animals. You can start to do it with other people. So it's just overall healthier. It's just overall more beneficial
And
when you start to do that.
Yeah, and there at the very bottom of that, there are pictures of a couple of bodybuilders who are vegans. So there's like a really good incentive that you can actually be a vegan and pile on like all this muscle.
Oh yeah, vegan is not about being not strong or weak or fragile or anything like that. There's vegan bodybuilders. I was reading a really good book where it was talking about how athletes that are vegan recover faster, and things like that. There's so many things that people don't know. And, of course, you can do any diet wrong. The American standard diet, you can do that wrong. You can do vegan wrong if you don't eat the proper things. But if you do it right, the health benefits are just amazing. It's, the health, the ethical part, it's something to definitely consider and look into.
Thank you very much, Calen Otto from Collectively Free. We want to encourage people for the holiday season coming up to buy vegan products, clothes products,
yes,
and vegan groceries.
Yep, and just in general, all the time. That's what we're moving towards, to help people, the planet, the animals, everyone.
Thank you so much, Calen Otto.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, good night.
Good night.
Okay, this is an interview with Jim Naureckas for Organic News on Awake Radio. Naureckas is an editor of Fair's magazine Extra, and Fair is fairness and accuracy in reporting. And just wrote the piece, "It's true, media did not cover Beirut bombings about 1/40th as much as they covered the Paris attacks." He also wrote, "Context-free coverage of terror helps perpetuate its causes," which states, "It feels callous to question the allocation of outrage. Empathy is in such short supply in this world that one hesitates to question it when it emerges. But as a longtime citizen of New York City, I'm all too aware of the weaponization of grief, the outpouring of non-context ahistorical sympathy after 9/11 helped pave the way for a violent reaction that killed in Iraq alone, roughly 150 times as many people as died in Lower Manhattan that day. An opportunistic catastrophe that did more to mock than average those deaths, than avenge those deaths, sorry. So I'm just going to read that much and start the discussion, and then I'll read the next 2 points that it makes. So just talk about that. I mean, so obviously you mean being a longtime citizen of New York City, right? You're referring to 9/11 and the weaponization of grief.
Sure. As a, we lived here during the September 11th attacks, and it really hit hard, all of us here, on a deep emotional level, because to us it was not a symbol of an attack on American honor or something. It was an actual building that we saw every day that was taken out of our landscape, and the reality of the people who were lost. We saw the posters every day. People putting up missing posters for their loved ones who were lost that day, and the feeling that I had here in New York was, I did not know a lot of people who were calling out for bloodshed to respond to this. The idea that we would feel better if someone else's city was bombed the way that ours was. I don't think it made a lot of sense to a lot of people here. But because there was this agenda that pre-existed on the part of the Bush administration and the new conservative movement that saw war in the Middle East as the solution to a lot of problems, it took our grief and horror at what had happened and turned it into the rationale for an attack on Saddam Hussein in Iraq, completely unrelated to the 9/11 incident, and the violence and the bloodshed that resulted from that move they're still with us today. The trauma that was justified on the basis of 9/11 is still reverberating in the Middle East and throughout the world. The rise of ISIS is pretty directly related to the destruction of Iraqi society and the creation of a vacuum that can be filled by this fundamentalist group. So when we see personally speaking, when I see the coverage of Paris, where it's sort of a question that the appropriate response to the violence in Paris is more violence in Syria and Iraq, as if the bombing and the violence in Paris is not in large part of resultant violence on the part of the West in Syria and Iraq. It makes me feel like deja vu all over again.
So let me just ask you this question about, do you think that was the plan of the U.S. with 9/11?
I mean, when you look at the writings of the new conservatives, the Project for a New American Century, they were clearly, they thought that having an excuse for war in the Middle East would be a good thing, and they talk about the sort of a hope for a Pearl Harbor life that they could make use of. I don't subscribe to the idea response to 9/11 from the Bush administration was, they really gave a good impression of chickens with their heads cut off. But they quickly realized that this fit in with their plan and repackaged. This was an attack carried out by people from Saudi Arabia, whose leaders were based in Afghanistan, and they repackaged that into an attack on Iraq, which was related not particularly to Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan, but was the places they really wanted to invade.
Why would Saudi Arabia attack the U.S.?
Well, the relationship between the Saudi Arabian ideology and Al Qaeda is a little complicated. There's sort of a bank shot where you have a ruling elite in Saudi Arabia that justifies its position of power based on very reactionary, repressive version of Islam, and does a lot. They do a lot to export that, and by promoting, the most puritanical and rigid view of the Quran abroad, they're able to get away with a rather decadent and self-gratifying lifestyle at home. And this creates. I don't think that Saudi Arabia directly ordered 9/11, but Osama bin Laden is a product of that philosophy of exporting kind of repressive Islam abroad in order to justify the rule of the Saudi family at home.
Why wouldn't the U.S. just attack Saudi Arabia back instead of Iraq?
Well, Saudi Arabia is, a very close partner of the United States in terms of the oil industry, which, the Bush family, very close to the Saudi family, and the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States is kind of the sort of client state relationship that they had is the model that the neoconservatives see as the ideal relationship between the United States and the Muslim world. If you think of the wars in the Middle East not as an actual response to September 11th, but an opportunistic excuse to do what they wanted to do anyway. They're not going to go after Saudi Arabia, where things are set up pretty much the way that they want them to be set up. They want to go after the countries that we're seeing as not being in the U.S. orbit and not subservient enough to U.S. demands, and that would be countries like Iraq and Libya and Syria, the places that the Project for the American Century wanted to target.
I mean, you have to admit it is pretty convenient, 9/11, that they use that as an excuse. And then you did mention that since then, in Iraq alone, 150 times as many people died. I mean,
that's but I think that's the best estimate. It's very hard to tell exactly how many people were killed, and some estimates go much harder than that.
So that I mean, you can kind of admit then that all of these. So I don't really like to call them wars because a war is more balanced and two people fighting each other, but what we have is more like a one-way attacks of people that I mean, I don't want to say they don't have the ability to arm themselves because they're getting, you know, funding, and, you know, they're getting funding, you know, by the very people that say that they want to, you know, get rid of terrorism, like the U.S. and
Right. So I think that part of the neoconservative vision is thinking that the U.S. military, because it's the strongest military in the world, that therefore the United States really can do anything it wants to, and just needs to have the willpower to exert its will. And that really, before the invasion of Iraq, that really seemed to be the prevailing philosophy on the part of that part of the foreign policy establishment. And I think that the limits of, you know, your ability to control the world based on having lots of cruise missiles and drones and so on are illustrated by the results in the region subsequently.
the thing that I just, you know, wanted to mention about 9/11, because I kind of tend to lean more towards, you know, the U.S. at least letting it happen in some way, because I mean it is kind of strange that you have all this military weight, but you use it, you know, after something happens, as opposed to using it before to prevent something from happening. So to me, that's kind of suspicious.
So again, it's not the, if you wanted to attack Iraq, which is really what they wanted to do, it's not what you would make up. You wouldn't, if you were going to invent a pretext to invade Iraq, presumably you would involve the Iraqis as the perpetrators, and then you could, you know, and it was almost like Afghanistan was saying they had to get out of the way. And they really sort of scrimped on devoting resources there because they knew that what they really wanted to do was invade a country that had no connection to September 11th, Iraq. And they could have avoided all that if, you know, if the whole thing was a pretense to begin with. You could have made a much more useful pretense.
Right. Okay, so now the next point, it says, just as the question of Al-Qaeda's motives in 2001 provoked more self-congratulation than serious inquiry, in parentheses, it's an extra update on October the 1st. Coverage of Paris in 2015 tends to skirt over political realities. Thus, the New York Times on November the 13th of this year could report a stunned and confused French capital was again left to wonder why us, once again. The obvious answer was alluded to obliquely by a soccer stadium spectator. With all the strikes in Syria, we're not safe anymore.
Right. You saw headlines that were talking about the attacking terrorists as an act of war, as if it were, you know, it was covered as though it were sort of Pearl Harbor, sort of sneak attack by ISIS on terrorists.
Wouldn't the same thing, could 9/11 be even considered the same thing?
Well, I mean, you know, there have been U.S. assaults on Al Qaeda prior to 9/11. You know, it was not the first. It was not the first attack by Al Qaeda, and it was not the first time that the United States had used its military against Al Qaeda. But in the case of France, there was an ongoing war. There was an ongoing war by France on ISIS, you know, which is they're a group that holds territory like Al Qaeda. They're a quasi-government in. They declared that they have a state in Iraq and Syria, and France, in conjunction with the United States, have been bombing very aggressively those, you know, ISIS positions in Iraq for almost a year now, and Syria for a short period of time. But just before the attack, they had announced that they were stepping up attacks on the oil facilities that ISIS has in Syria, and that was the context of the attacks in Paris happened in. It was not a peaceful France that suddenly had violence being done against. It was France engaged in active warfare against this group. Should not be surprised that this group, which is known for its terrorist tactics, fights back against the bombing with terrorism. That's kind of what you would expect ISIS to do in this situation.
I'm going to actually skip to the very bottom of your article. Context-free coverage of terror helps perpetuate its causes, because it in my opinion, just sums up exactly what's going on, and then we can, just sort of go back and elaborate. So it reads, noting that France's enthusiasm for military intervention in the Middle East long predated the Paris attacks puts one at the risk of being mistaken for an apologist for ISIS war crimes. Indeed, one suspects that fear of such misidentification leads journalists to downplay or omit French violence in describing the context of the attacks. Such willful avoidance of history helps perpetuate the illusion that Western violence is the solution to ISIS terror rather than one of its main causes. Because, it makes perfect sense in trying to, get to the bottom of something, to, figure out which is the cause and which is the effect. And that is exactly what propagandists want to keep confused and act like the ones initiating and being the aggressors and the cause are instead the ones being attacked and victimized.
Yeah, I don't want to downplay the viciousness of the Paris attacks. I've heard of those war crimes. It's forbidden to target civilians in a war. You can make a distinction between the U.S. and French bombing of Syria, which kills more civilians than died in the Paris attacks. But as a byproduct of, it's not exactly the same thing to bomb economic targets and kill civilians as a result, as it is to target civilians directly. Those are different things. But on the other hand, to the dead civilians, they're not that different. I think it's easy to sort of to think of the West as the innocent party, and the aggression from ISIS as being entirely unprovoked. I think that the situation really is more grave than that. And kind of more importantly, the question is not who is more evil. The question is how do you reduce the violence in the Middle East, and as it's spreading to around the world to France and to Russia, and to countries in Africa. As the violent response, predictably, in my opinion, creates more violence. So, how do you respond in a way that does not simply fuel violence, that results in less people being killed? And when you don't talk about the prior violence on the part of France, I think it's connection to understand that maybe the problem is not that we haven't killed enough people or that France hasn't killed enough people.
I mean, right, they just keep responding to what is clearly they're causing by just doing, the same thing and adding to rather than, de-escalating.
And there are a lot of mixed motives. That if like, for example, the desire of France and the United States to overthrow the Syrian government, which predated the rise of ISIS in Syria, is a big reason why there is territory in Syria that ISIS is able to exploit. But you don't see people in U.S. corporate media making the connection between the French support for the civil war in Syria and the rise of ISIS, even though the cause and effect there is pretty darn direct.
It sounds like somebody's jumping on the floor in your apartment or something, like the people above you.
Yes, there is construction elsewhere in the building. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was coming through the.
What can you do? Okay, so the last point is readers were presumed to know this referred to the French bombing campaign against ISIS in Syria, which began in September following aerial attacks against ISIS positions in Iraq that started last year. It refers to CNN on September 27th of this year. Just last week, France joined in intensified strikes against ISIS-controlled oil fields in Syria, New York Times, November 12th of this year. By last summer, Western airstrikes against ISIS in both Iraq and Syria had reportedly killed at least 459 civilians, including more than 100 children. It refers to The Guardian, August 3rd of this year.
Right. And I think one of the questions that you can ask yourself is there a way, if your goal is to take resources away from ISIS, is there a way to do that other than aerial bombing? ISIS, the ISIS-controlled area is landlocked. They're surrounded largely by countries that are either hostile to ISIS or allied to the United States. And if you had a concerted effort based on the idea that really the most important thing here is to shut down ISIS's operations, you could have an effective boycott, an effective embargo on oil sales. But because there are other things, our relations with Turkey, our relations with Saudi Arabia, and our opposition to the Syrian and Iranian governments are more important than shutting down ISIS. You can't get an effective embargo, and you can't shut down the sale of oil from ISIS territory. And therefore, you turn to bombing, which necessarily kills civilians, because these are civilian operations in ISIS territory. And so you can't close them down with aerial bombing without killing people. So you've made a choice that you don't want to do the political thing. You want to do the military thing, and that is, I think, very typical of the way that our foreign policy establishment thinks, and the way that foreign policy is discussed in U.S. media. That the military is easy and political is hard.
That sounds right.
And the fact is that you can't accomplish what you ostensibly want to accomplish, what you present as your goals of ending terrorist violence by fueling violence. And I think that something we haven't really talked about is the motivations of ISIS, which and I think this is something that really does not get looked at nearly enough. The fact that Al Qaeda back in before September 11th was explaining that the goal of September 11th, the goal of an attack on the United States, was to draw the United States into a war in the Middle East that would hurt the Middle East, that would hurt the United States, was almost completely ignored in U.S. media. And likewise, ISIS has made it very clear that they're interested in creating a sharp opposition between the West and Islam. They find the idea of the West tolerating Islam to be really dangerous for Islam, for their fanatical extremist view of Islam. The idea of Islam being accepted as a religion in the West is the last thing they want, and the refugees being accepted in the West they think that's terrible, and they're very happy. It's explicit in their they have a magazine where they explain what they're doing, and they're explicitly talking about what they call the gray zone, which is an area where Islam is not dominant, but it's tolerated, and they hate this. They are explicitly trying to get rid of this. And this is why they encourage operations like terrorists, because they hope to provoke the exact reaction that the right is having after terrorism, which is to treat all Muslims as the enemy, to turn back refugees. If you actually talked about what your enemy was trying to do, you would see that much of the reaction is exactly what was intended by the people who advocated for this attack.
Can we talk a little bit about, right, because if they wanted to, just stop all of these terrorist attacks, all of the countries involved, right, just clearly stop funding the terrorism. And so the profiting that goes on of the weapons industries, and how, they don't really want to stop these attacks.
Right, it is, every bomb that is dropped on the Middle East by the United States is something that a company profits from. These things, billions of dollars are being spent, and the industry that, when you have a multi-billion-dollar industry like the arms industry, it creates an infrastructure. You have think tanks that are funded by the weapons industry that justify the approach that keeps the weapons industry in business. You have, companies like Lockheed Martin are major advertisers on the television shows that discuss foreign policy, what our options are, and so it's not surprising that the shows that are sponsored by weapons manufacturers have on as guests analysts who are funded by weapons manufacturers, and you often get retired military personnel who want to work for the military industry, the weapons industry. weapons are the answer. You rarely see peace advocates brought on to talk about what the options. You rarely see like people from political science departments, who are experts in the Middle East. It's much harder to see those sorts of guests than it is to see someone who had their career figuring out how to bomb people and now works for a company to make bombs.
Right.
Those are the guys you turn to.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty clear that they really do want to keep all this warring going, all these, so-called terrorists. They just want it to perpetuate. While that expression, talking out of the other side of your mouth.
Right. Yeah, there definitely are a lot of, I would say hidden agendas, but these agendas are not so hidden.
Exactly. I mean, the effects of what they're doing, I think of, just going to kind of scale it down a little bit, to like the prison system and solitary confinement and what that does to prisoners, and the clear effects that does to someone. Like they use solitary confinement as this punishment for again, like things that are not even crimes, things that are just normal behavior, and all they end up doing is making the person worse. All they end up doing is intensifying the problems and the conditions, and the effects of what they do are clearly there, like right in your face, and
Right.
and yet I don't know, like it gets dismissed, it just gets overlooked. I mean, I don't know sort of the answer to that. I mean,
Yeah, it's not a bad analogy. I mean, I think the relation between feels something referred to as the prison industrial complex in analogy to the military industrial complex.
yeah.
And I think that there is a similar, prisons are a huge business, police is a huge business.
Right.
And it does, if you had a criminal justice system that actually deterred crime,
Huh.
it would eliminate itself. So that's not the solution you want. As a person in the prison industrial complex, you don't want to solve the crime problem. You want to
Exactly.
maintain the crime problem and have your services be the very profitable approach to the crime problem. And it does, and some of this is it's unintentional in the sense that people are not necessarily sitting down with a flowchart beforehand saying that if we arrest all the young men from this neighborhood, it's going to destroy the economy of the neighborhood, and it will result in more young men having no economic options other than crime, and so we can arrest more of them. But that is the effect, and it's not really unintentional either. I mean, it's a system that works. If you do this thing, you have a system that produces a result, and the result reinforces the system.
Right, for the very few at the very top.
Right.
At the expense of the many at the very bottom.
And I think that the war on terror is similarly a system that produces results that justifies the system. And if you get a cycle like that, it's very hard to break out of it.
Yeah, it is a vicious cycle. That's the whole point, is to break the vicious cycle. Because, I mean, just yesterday I went to film a rally, here in Brooklyn it started at the Barclays Center, the 1-year anniversary of the killing of Tamir Rice in Cleveland, the 12-year-old playing in a park by himself with a toy gun. And I mean, it got a little bit heated. Thank God. I mean, nobody was arrested, but I mean, it's just it's so clear that it's all about just keeping everything going, like so people just have jobs. I mean, it's clear that the police are not protecting and serving the public, but actually, the complete opposite of that.
Right.
And I mean,
For people to people who don't have a vested interest in the perpetuation of the system, but do have an interest in the safety of their lives,
right.
of not being attacked by the police or being sent to a war overseas. I think that the public needs to keep its eyes on the prize and to question the answers that we've been given that are clearly not solving the problems that we have.
What do we do? I mean, because with the interviews that I've done, I mean, most people that I interview basically just say the same thing. The public has to rise up. I mean, when enough people just object and start to really challenge the system, that's the only other time, because the people in charge are certainly not going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty scary. I mean, that means a lot of imprisonment, wrongful imprisonment and wrongful death.
Right. Our little piece of the solution is to be calling attention to the limits on the discussion that we're having in the media. I think we need to have a much broader discussion that asks a lot more questions, that is a lot more skeptical of the answers that we've been given.
Right. More challenge.
In order to really think about what's being done, what hasn't worked, what could work, as solutions to the problems that we have that wouldn't simply perpetuate problems.
Exactly. So Jim, just want to make sure I'm saying your name right. Naureckas.
I say Naureckas.
Naureckas.
Yeah.
Of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting.
Right.
Thank you for joining me on Organic News on Awake Radio. I'm going to play some of your interview, hopefully the whole thing, tomorrow between 6 and 8 p.m.
Great.
Eastern Standard Time.
I appreciate that.
So.
Can you send me a link?
Oh, sure.
Thanks.